To your left, the Carolina Crusher. To the right, Nightmare.
Gary, what we're going to be looking at is Steve Hess, the Nightmare, the same truck he's been running for about 6 or 7 years. It's a GMC, but he goes up against a brand new Gary Porter prepared Waitsville, North Carolina-based Carolina Crusher. Fiberglass body, really looking good, Gary.
Well, Nightmare looks like he got the good jump, but here comes Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher. Nightmare's in trouble.
Okay, perfect example on this run. The older suspension trucks are too stiff. They're rigid. That's why Hess had problems. Meanwhile, Porter goes through with the new sponge-type suspension, and he'll go into the next round.
Well, a new paint job to go along with that new fiberglass body truck, and here is the good jump off the start, and here's the difference right here as they land that first time.
Okay, you notice how Porter stays close to the ground. Hess is bouncing all over. The race is over for all intents and purposes, Gary Lee.
Drives him, works on him. Andy Brass in Bigfoot 8 out of St. Louis, Missouri. Along with Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher. These guys have faced each other many times before.
You know, that's so very true, but every time they go to the starting line, they put the war paint on. The friendship goes out the window. It's the first one to the other end. The 681 is quick time. Brass drills the left lane, comes out going hard. Look at this run, Gary. Again.
Oh, Andy Brass, he almost goes out of bounds, just barely keeps it in. Let's check the time. Look at that.
Hey, Gary, check these numbers. A 643 out of the left lane, but a lot of damage to be done to the vehicles. Everybody's landing cockeyed to the left. Replay's going to show us right now.
Coming right at you. Watch Andy Brass and Bigfoot land hard on the left side tires. That big.
Gary, you know, no matter what form of motorsport's in, there's such intensity at this point in time. They started the engines. Whether you're coming off the number 4 corner at Raceway Park or you're rolling into the lanes in Memphis, everybody's pumped. Tim Hall will be going in the other lane against the Chevrolet.
This is the big boss against the Carolina Crusher.
Well, whole shot by the Carolina Crusher. Porter drilled extreme.
Look at that suspension work. He was
almost
in trouble.
Gary, he's going over.
He's going over, yes! This is a very short runoff area, really, for the speed they can pick up, and he climbs out. He's going to be all right, but we'll see how much damage was done to that brand new Carolina Crusher.
You know, Gary, I made an observation here. He's running one of the new suspension trucks, meaning it's, you know, it's softer. And the roll of the truck was almost like a sprint car rolling with a wing on it. The suspension actually absorbed some of the impact, wouldn't you say?
Well, it looked like he almost got upside down when he came over that second set of jumps. He was tipped over to the left. He brought it back upright. Let's watch again. Now watch as he negotiates the second jump. He comes down and almost pitches off to the driver's side to the left, right here. He brings it back down, but he never really gains control. He's on the brakes now, trying to stop it. When he turns to avoid that guardrail down there, he rolls it on over.
For all intents and purposes, when he turned it to the left, he high-sided it. A motorcycle terminology, he high-sided it, and it just went over on him. But the soft suspension, I think, helped him.
A brand new race truck, a monster truck with fiberglass, and look at the damage. We're not sure how bad the superstructure was damaged, but perhaps we'll have a chance now, Army, to talk to Gary Porter.
Gary, real quick, let me grab you. First of all, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Do you have any idea what caused it?
Well, I hit that second set of cars a little bit crooked. I started to let out of it, and I didn't know where the other guy was at. I said, well, I got to go for the win, and, you know, I should have backed out and turned it, you know, a little bit and slowed down, but I didn't, and the truck landed hard on the left side, and it started coming over this way, and I seen the pole, and I hit the brakes a little bit too hard, I think. So.
We're glad you're okay. We'll see you another day.
Okay, thank you.
So Gary Porter will have some work to do now as he surveys the damage on Carolina Crusher. A good crowd on hand, bathed in sunshine here in the state of Tennessee as they pull the Crusher off the racetrack. More to come.
That's exactly right, Gary.
We take a look at Gary Porter. They've gone to work. That truck is back in competition, the Carolina Crusher.
Gary, you've been around racing a long time. Things like this always happen, don't they? There's something that gets these guys going, and the Crusher is trying to pull the Cinderella story of the day, but Taurus is not going to be reading the same book that the Crusher is.
Jack Willman Jr., the far lane. Gary Porter, the near lane. And it looks like the youngster may have the advantage. Yes, Willman will win it.
Gary, did you see how far he cleared the last set of cars? And look at the time.
That will give him the bye to the finals. 7.56 is Dan with a big thumbs up. He runs over to congratulate Junior on his victory over Gary Porter and Carolina Crusher.
You know, Gary, I noticed something else about that team. Those guys run everywhere they go. Watch this. They won't walk anywhere. Watch this. Got to run. There you go. What'd I say?
Just a tad animated as well.
Hey, that's why they're good, I guess. They're going to the final. That's all that counts.
I'm wondering, though, Army, if there's a problem with Taurus. Because of all that animation, they acted like there might be something they had to... Jack Willman takes the victory as we look at the Carolina Crusher, a real popular driver. This is Gary Porter, and John Breen drives the Micro Machine.
Breen's based out of Jeff City, Missouri. Porter comes out of North Carolina. These guys have gone head-to-head many, many times. Both of them driving Chevrolets.
Well, if qualifying's any indication, the Carolina Crusher should have an easy time of this, and indeed Gary Porter does. Oh, he makes it look easy.
Yeah, but let's go back to the starting line real quick. Remember a moment ago, John Moore was sitting there looking kind of disgruntled and confused. Now John Breen sits in the same lane. They may be having a problem with these kill boxes. Porter makes straight as an arrow run. He's going to be a happy camper. He's ready to go to the next round.
Let's go back near the start-finish line and check in with John Breen.
I don't know what the hell it did. It shut off. I thought the kill box shut it off.
And here's Army Armstrong with Gary Porter.
Gary, an 8.011. That's quick, but you got to go against quicker. Taurus.
Right, Taurus, I didn't run the truck, as hard as I could that round. A Micro Machine, something happened to him on the line, and I didn't run the truck as hard as I could. I still have more left for it.
But look at the air that he is getting and what turns out to be almost a bye run for him. Now we look. The Black Stallion, as we said, probably will not be able to continue. Here's a look now at Gary Porter in the Carolina Crusher. He goes against Jack Willman Sr. in the brand new Taurus.
This could be one of the quickest monster truck races ever.
Side by side over the first set of cars. Taurus may have him, but Taurus is in trouble.
Gary, the top end charge impact blows out the right front wheel. He's trying to keep it upright. Wellman's okay. How about Porter?
Well, Porter was fast. Remember, the fastest loser advances. The fastest loser from round 2 will continue on. Let's look again. A good start, a good hole shot right there by Willman. Now, Willman seems to be out of control all the way through this run. He'll have to change the right front, and changing a tire on a monster truck is not like a NASCAR pit stop.
But the big story trackside, I don't believe Taurus is going to make the call for the next round. Snakebite gets another shot at Bigfoot, Gary.
Indeed he will. Snakebite against Bigfoot. The winner goes to the final against the winner of Carolina Crusher and King Crunch. All right, we are ready for the semifinal action here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. And there is Scott Stevens in the Auto Value King Crunch. And there is Gary Porter, the fastest loser from round 2 in the Carolina Crusher.
At this point in time, you expect there to be a theme song in the background, and the song needs to be Only the Strong Survive.
A pair of Chevys side by side, and it's going to be Scott Stevens through another barricade. Where's he going?
Right outside the television truck.
And the Carolina Crusher, Gary Porter, takes the victory. I do believe. Let's look again. There is Scott Stevens. He is okay as he climbs out to a nice ovation from the fans here in Bloomsburg. I think that Scott Stevens really had the advantage in that run. Army, let's watch again and see where he gets in trouble. But it looks to me like he's leading.
He is leading. What happens when the chassis settles, it springs to the left rear. Now he's just two-wheeling.
Right through that Hydra barricade again. We look at it head on, and as he goes off to the right, Gary Porter goes to victory. It's the big blue Ford against the bright red and yellow Chevrolet in the championship here at Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania.
Both truck of the high-tech nature. Should be a good run. Going to be a driver's race, but the classic battle comes back. The American flag on the Chevrolet going against the Mattel flag on the Ford. Chevrolet Ford battle, Pennsylvania 4x4 Jamboree. The man himself, Bob Chandler's taking a picture of this one. He knows it's going to be a great race. Gary, you take the call.
Remember, Andy Brass, as the fast qualifier, has lane choice. He has taken the right lane each time out. That seems to be the best and the smoothest lane. It's going to be Bigfoot. Bigfoot has the advantage, yes. Andy Brass takes the victory here in Pennsylvania. An appreciative crowd on hand as Brass turns back the challenge of Gary Porter. Let's look once again.
On every run today, Gary, he cleared every obstacle. Every car was completely clear.
And he takes the victory by a truck length over Gary Porter as he climbs out of the Crusher. Here's our victor.
City, Missouri. He and his brother Bobby been around the sport for many years. Matter of fact, they actually run 3 trucks in the Monster Truck Series. They brought the Micro Machine over to them to go head-to-head. The old Carolina Crusher.
Gary Porter in that big Chevrolet, side by side to the second ramp, and who's going to win it? Gary Porter by about a half length. He won that in the second half of that run.
Yeah, he pulled it out on the top end of the track. One of the things I was watching, I hope this camera angle shows us, John Breen had his hands full in that last 100 feet, the shutdown area. Watch Breen from here on. Where Porter settled down, look at Breen. He is still bouncing. There's a dip in that left lane. The drivers are getting spooked about it, Gary.
Colorado, the hometown. And there is Gary Porter out of North Carolina in the Carolina Crusher.
Gary, one of the things we're going to see the rest of the afternoon, everybody's got a lane choice, I guarantee you. It's going to stay away from the left lane. The lane the snake's in should be the bad lane if the drivers are right.
And Gary Porter by a fender. Well, maybe a truck length as he pulled it out in the final 100 feet. And that's the uniqueness of this racetrack, Army, the additional 100 feet past the last set of cars.
Normally,
right there's where he wins it.
Right, normally the last
against
car
the Carolina Crusher. And the winners of each will go to the final round. And here we have the snake bite over there on the far right side of your screen. And he goes up against Gary Porter in the Carolina Crusher. Gary, an old, wily veteran.
Snake bite keeps slithering back into these eliminations. It's amazing. He's trying to make Gary Porter think. He's doing a little side job. Porter went into the line. Snake bite stopped, and he went forward, backed up. Just trying to make him think about what he's going to do. But I don't believe he's going to rattle the Crusher. Let's see.
And keep in mind that Snakebite has yet to win a round.
But he keeps coming back.
Through being a fast loser or through the wreckage of somebody else, he keeps coming back. But this time, well, he won't make it through this one as Gary Porter takes the victory in the Chevrolet, the Carolina Crusher. So the Snakebite, well, they have de-venomized the Snakebite today, and he'll go to the paddock area.
The optimum word there was today. He'll be back, I'll guarantee you.
So Gary Porter will find himself in the championship shootout as a great crowd is on hand.
Schaefer is doing something that is new to this sport. He's actually doing a dry hop or a burnout on the starting line. I told you earlier that truck is 6 inches longer than everybody else's. That means if you start in the tracks of the man in front of you, you got to go over a little hump. Where he dug the track out, Schaefer's digging his own track out. And I think that he was kind of spoofing me a minute ago. Something is happening to that truck 10 feet off the starting line. I believe he's making a transmission shift. He runs a Lenco transmission just like they run in the dragsters. I just think he might have something up his sleeve.
Well, let's find out. It's a good hole shot by Gary Porter, but look at Fred Schaefer make up the ground, out of control, but he's going to win it. Hang on. I thought he was going to roll over.
Well, I believe we might have a disqualification here. Schaefer, watch the screen. There's an out of bounds on the right side. Schaefer was pushing it. Boy, Porter left the line like a rock. 10,000-pound trucks leaving just as hard as pro stock drag cars. Look at this. Plus, they jump 20 and 30 feet in the air.
Schaefer has the advantage, but right here, he's going to get disqualified. And that means the Carolina Crusher, Gary Porter, will take the victory here in Bloomsburg. And I can't believe he took it in the left lane, Army.
Well, Gary, right before the final, I sat here and literally made a fool out of myself, said the winner's going to come out of the right side of the track. Gary, I'm being very honest with you. I in no way expected a win for this event to come off the left lane.
That's right. I knew I was the underdog going into that race. You know, I had the bad lane, so I just had to plan everything before I got to the line, how I was going to leave the line, where I was going to set the truck up, and I was just going to have to try to do everything perfect on that run, and I think it worked out pretty good.
Our congratulations to Gary Porter as he takes the victory in Bloomsburg.
Monster Truck #1.
Well, today the Carolina Crusher is #1. For Army Armstrong, I'm Gary Lee. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Trucks and Tractor Power. Now here's news of an exciting home video from Diamond P Sports. Qualifying this afternoon.
Gary Porter is experimenting with the transmission. Normally in the sport of drag racing, they have a transmission button or a stall speed. They can lock the transmission in and take the engine way up on the RPM. Porter's experimenting with that. That's all I know. But watch how quick he'll leave the starting line. Meanwhile, he's going up against Bennett Clark. Now, we haven't seen Bennett on tour. He's teamed up with Valvoline for this year. Let's see how he's going to do. But watch Porter.
Well, Porter won it in that section of track between the cars. It was side by. Look at this rough ride that the Clydesdale's taken.
Yeah, Bennett Clark with a Valvoline Clydesdale ran him harder than I thought he would off the starting line. But
well, he has the advantage right there, but right here he loses it.
No
See that truck jump up in the air?
Yeah, the chassis unloaded on Clark. Meanwhile, Porter settled down and went to the next jump. Well, Bennett Clark
almost went on over. He almost took a nosedive. Here's Army.
The quick qualifier, Gary Porter, has a unique situation that nobody else has. Gary, that's the fact that you're going to have lane choice all day long. What lane are you going to be choosing?
I think I'll stay with the right lane all night. You know, it seems to be the best lane for me. I qualified in it. You know, the left lane, there's not that much difference in the lanes today, I don't think. But, you know, since I've run the right lane and got used to it, I'm going to stick with it.
Nightmare and Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher.
This race should show us something. Porter's truck should be a lot softer, a lot smoother. It's the new technology that he's incorporated in the suspension, the cantilever suspension, they call it. That's the truck closest to us. Hess, the back truck, the GMC truck, he hasn't made the move over to the new style truck. I look for him to do that next year. But you should see a lot of bouncing in the far truck and a smooth run in the truck closest to us.
Nose up in the air, under acceleration. Oh, side by side, a good run, but Gary Porter, in what we call no man's land out there between those cars, took the advantage right there, and he takes the victory in the Carolina Crusher.
No man's land is so important. You must be going straight after you clear the first set of cars in order to be lined up for the second set of cars. Hey, a 730 is a respectable run, Gary.
Well, remember, the fastest loser in round 2 will advance. That's why we're showing you the fast loser so far has been Snakebite. So there is a head-on look at Colt Cobra in the Snakebite truck. And he goes up against the Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter, with the winner advancing to the championship round here in Canfield.
Gary, I was just thinking of something. Colt Cobra, we use the term slithers into the next round, and we're making a play because of the, as we go inside with Gary Porter, but we're making a play on words, but that Cobra truck is always showing up in the Final 4.
Yeah, and usually he makes it as a fast loser of the second round.
You go to the pay window, they don't care how you got there. They just want to know where you finished.
Side by side, a good race, but right here again, Gary Porter. That center section between the cars is where Gary Porter wins these events.
His truck settles down, he throttles up, it's going straight, and that's it.
Yeah, now watch how close it is, Army. Watch how close it is right here. As soon as they hit that flat section between the cars, he's on the throttle, and he takes the victory.
Boy, it's amazing. Porter's got the right lane figured out. We're going to go back inside with him, onboard camera, show you how much these guys do get tossed around in that truck.
Well, it actually looks smoother from inside the truck than what it does watching from outside. Yes, he glances over. You did win it. And you'll go up against, he goes up against Jack Willman Sr. in a brand new Chevy truck he calls Taurus.
Now, Gary, throughout the show, we've been talking about the old style truck and the new style truck. The finalists set up with 2 new style trucks. I'll tell you who's going to win this race. The truck that has the least hang time, the truck that can stay closest to the track, will take the win.
Jack Willman Sr. is in the lane of choice. That is the right lane in Taurus. Well, let's see how much hang time they get here. Now, you're right, Gary Porter, a little more air, and the victory goes to Jack Willman. You were right on, Army. Jack Willman did not have as much air time or hang time. He takes the victory here in Canfield in that brand new Chevrolet pickup truck.
Yeah, Willman stayed close to the track. Watch him when he settles in no man's land. See, it's just a smooth drive. Meanwhile, Porter, a lot of bounce. He's in trouble on the far side.
And there was a dusty day here in Canfield, Ohio. When the dust settled, Jack Willman took the victory. For Army Armstrong, I'm Gary Lee. Thanks for joining us. That wraps it up from Eastern Ohio. We'll see you next week on Trucks and Tractor Power. Now stay tuned for news of an exciting home video release from
talking a moment ago
Sports.
about Scott Stevens, another red light you notice coming in these windows. We keep talking about the technology. Again, that red light you see in the windshield at night racing indicates that the electrical system is complete. On this particular truck, a Van Loo's, the Dodge, his light is located in the grill. That's important because, remember, Gary, there's a kill switch in these trucks in case they get out of shape. You've got to have a complete electrical circuit to make it work.
Van Medicine, the Carolina Crusher. We're in Canfield, Ohio, and this should be the Crusher all the way.
Man, Porter leaves that line like a rocket. Again, in the good lane.
Porter has always had the horsepower. He's always done well on the long outdoor tracks, but now he's learning to dial the chassis, and he's making that chassis work to get the horsepower to the track.
What he's done, he's made a lot of inroads in the field of his transmission. He's teamed up with somebody. I don't know who it is, but he leaves that line just like a pro stocker in a drag race.
Well, let's take a look at who's in the left lane this time. It's Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher, and there is Mr. Ford. Bigfoot, Andy Brass, Bigfoot 8. Well, Andy obviously has the advantage right now because he's in that near lane.
Yeah, but don't tell Gary Porter that. The Chevrolet people believe Porter can pull it off. If anybody can out of the left lane, it might be Gary. Okay, now he clears the first jump.
But look at the horsepower.
Whoa.
Look at the horsepower that Bob Chandler truck developed. It was all Gary Porter through the first half of the run and all Andy Brass through the second half. And watch this again. A good light for Gary Porter.
Yeah,
look at this.
Yeah, he clears the first car, settles down good, decent bounce, but Andy Brass literally flies past him in midair.
A textbook run, and here is Andy. Shot at him will be a pair of Chevrolets. Gary Porter and the Carolina Crusher out of Wadesboro, North Carolina. Now the state of Texas, a battered but still drivable King Crunch, the auto value King Crunch of Scott Stevens.
You know, these spectators here are really getting to see some great monster truck racing. They appreciate everybody, but you got an odds-on favorite. You know who it is here. Everybody is kind of pulling for Scott Stevens. They know he's had a tough weekend, but when that light goes green, Scott Stevens has one enemy in this world. That's going to be Gary Porter.
You can't really call Scott Stevens an underdog, but he is so battered up this season. The fans want to see him do well here in Canfield. So it's Chevy against modified Chevy. There's the left lane with the advantage to Scott. Does something break right there, Army? Because Gary Porter takes the victory.
Well, like I say, Porter was not going to cut him any slack at all. He knew Stevens had the potential to beat him till the light goes green. Porter goes south big time. It's a good race to right here. Bounce comes to Porter. Wacko, he goes to the win.
Once again, the new style suspension. The truck settles down. The horsepower takes command, and Gary Porter wins it.
Well, Gary, we just found out something we don't like to hear. Is it true the word we're getting? You're not reading any oil pressure on the engine.
That's right. When I pull to the line, I'm getting, about 40 pounds of oil pressure, which I'm normally run about 60. When I get to the other end, it is just about on zero. I'm running about 3 pounds of oil pressure when I get to the finish line. I think the oil pickup has broke off of the pump. I'm going to put some more oil in it, overfill it, hoping, the pump can pick it up, without having a pickup tube and everything on there, and hopefully the motor won't lock up.
Okay, we'll be watching you.
Okay, thank you.
Versus Chevrolet,
well, that could be about
going against Carolina Crusher, but we're going to be seeing something else. I think you're going to be seeing two of the most gentlemanly drivers in the sport. Andy Brass knows the Chevrolet is having problems. Andy Brass has been in that situation before. Don't look for any games. Look for a heads-up straight race, and they're going to start those trucks, I believe, go to the starting line and race to the other end. Two gentlemen. Let's see which one's going to come out on top tonight.
All right, there's a look at Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher with the oil pickup problem. And he goes up against Bigfoot 8. This is Andy Brass. So we have North Carolina against Missouri.
Well, Gary, this is exactly what I thought would happen. Andy Brass let Gary start his truck, go to the line. He immediately goes into the line with him. They're here to race. They're not here to play games.
Well, they also are considering the good of the entire sport, and not just this one championship run here in Canfield.
Oh, we got a race. Check it out, Gary.
Look at this. Look at the Crusher. And here comes Foot. Bigfoot has so much horsepower. Once that pickup truck settles down in no man's land, we have seen it time and time and time again. The Crusher had him. Gary Porter had him.
They look like fighter pilots dogfighting each other in no man's land. Look at this. Boy, they are heads up.
But watch, Gary Porter has the measure of Foot right here, and here comes Andy Brass. It's all horsepower.
Exactly.
And there's the margin of victory, and here's Andy Brass. For Bennett Clark, the Clydesdale, the Valvoline Clydesdale this season. Won against the Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter, a pair of Chevrolets.
Well, Gary, what can you say about these two guys? They're like two old street fighters. They've been here before. The Valvoline sponsor, Clydesdale, Bennett Clark, he's just coming back on the tour. He hasn't quite got it figured out. On the other lane, Gary Porter looks to be leading a life of charm right now.
Did you see the second set of cars, the way Gary found the air? Watch again. Now watch Gary go over the second set of cars through what we call no man's land.
Right.
Now watch this jump right here.
Smooth.
That is textbook.
It's like
The
landing
truck
a
settles
747,
down.
yeah.
That was an impressive. Take a look at a
drive
good
by Gary
Hoosier boy.
Porter.
Columbia City, Indiana, Steve Heston, Nightmare with an older variety of suspension. You talk about the new and the old. Here's a new suspension under Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher. We talk about weight transfer and suspension and chassis. Let's talk about transferring some horsepower to the wheels.
Well, Gary, as you know, horsepower, weight, and everything is very, very important. Numbers games, what I'm talking about here. Monster truck racing is no different. 2,000-pound tires, we talk about them all the time. The weight of the monster truck, 10 to 12,000 pounds. The horsepower of these monster trucks generate around 1,500 to 2,000 horsepower. But the big trick is, how do you get the horsepower to move all that weight? Well, the magic number there could very easily be the number 8. That number 8 we're talking about is located in the transmission. It's in the form of what we call a torque converter. An 8-inch torque converter transfers all the horsepower we were talking about to move these behemoth monster trucks. So basically what I'm telling you, Gary Lee, is if you don't have a good number 8 or torque converter, all the rest of the numbers we talk about are just zeros.
Well, since you know all about the mechanics, you can go ahead and work on my vehicles, and I'll just drive them as we get set for more competition here in round 2. The Carolina Crusher and Nightmare. Nightmare with a hole shot.
Yeah, he actually moved first, but Porter will pull him back in no man's land.
It's that 8-inch torque converter. He converted all that horsepower to the wheels, and he takes the victory here in Canfield. So the Carolina Crusher will advance.
It's really amazing that all that horsepower, 1,500 horsepower, will move 10 to 15,000 pounds, and it all does have to go through that 8-inch torque converter.
A lot of wear and tear on the drive line in these monster trucks, but right there you can see that horsepower going to work because Nightmare did have the hole shot, but the Carolina Crusher will transfer in competition. And here is a look at Gary Porter out of Wadesboro, North Carolina. He has just a ton of horsepower, and he likes the longer, faster track.
Oh, he does. He likes to get out and leg the motor. You know, on the front of the Colt Cobra vehicle, Colt Cobra will tell you those are fangs. You know what Gary Porter just told me? That's a snaggle-tooth truck. That's not a fangs on the front of that.
All right, well, let's see what happens. They can talk all they want, but once that light turns green, they let their right foot do the talking.
That's right. Whoa. Cobra drilled the light. Porter's going to have to play catch-up.
Can he do it? Can he do it? No! The snake gets him.
Snaggle-tooth or
That
not,
is
he's
an
going to the
upset.
final. Yeah.
That is an upset.
Gee, it's almost like the snake has got a spell on these guys, Gary.
You know, I'm wondering, as we look at that slow motion replay at the start, I think that Gary Porter only has the rear wheels pushing that truck. He does not have four-wheel drive.
I didn't notice. That could very easily be the case, but no matter what, we know half the final is set. It's going to be the snake out of Colorado.
Well, the snake has been waiting for this for a long time. As we take a look at Gary Porter, he climbs out. Perhaps something wrong with the Carolina Crusher. Yeah, he's looking up in front. So there is a problem with the front drive on that pickup truck. And here at Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher with some sponsorship from Big A Auto Parts.
And also the four-wheel drive center on the other side, the Penduliner people are involved in the Nightmares racing operation. So a lot of major corporations realizing they get a lot of exposures on these monster trucks. GMC, Chevrolet, let's see what's going to happen.
Spin the tires at the starting line, and it's Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher. Once again, the Carolina Crusher was the fourth fastest qualifier. He had lane choice.
The chassis, you can see a good demonstration here. Watch the truck on the left how it lands soft. Truck
That's
on the right.
Newer chassis, the newer suspension system.
Truck on the right just bounces. 50-foot mark.
Here's a look at Mike. Well, there is the youngster from Granite City, Illinois, near St. Louis. Now we look at the man from Carolina, the Carolina Crusher. There is Jack Willman Jr., only 24 years of age, and Gary Porter. And Gary says you don't need to announce my age, so we won't.
Whoa,
oh, Gary was asleep at the throttle.
Whoa.
Gary Porter simply was asleep. The light turned green, and Jack Willman was away.
Yeah, but Gary, you got to remember, they leave off an electrical starting system. He could have Gary, I believe he did. He red-lighted on the start of that race. There's official. He jumped the gun. You got to cut the tree to get a win, but the tree fell on him when he cut it that time.
There is the frustration showing in father and son. Jack Willman Jr. and Sr. as Jr. walks away, and now we look at no one in that shed. Colt was all right, but that's what happens with a short runoff area when these trucks get out of control. Now we have semifinal action. We take a look at Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher, against Fred Schaefer in Barefoot, a pair of Chevrolets.
This could be the quickest run of the day. Fred Schaefer look for a wheels-up run. The Crusher's not going to roll over. Both of them Chevrolet. It's going to be quick. Oh, Porter leads. Schaefer airs it out.
And Schaefer takes it by a fender. Fred Schaefer, the fast qualifier, and you can see why he was the fast qualifier. Look at it again, Army. They leave. Well, the whole shot, you're right, goes to Gary Porter.
Gary Porter worked off a line lock like the drag racers use on the transmission to get the initial jump, but Schaefer just muscles by with that horsepower in the far lane.
Well, it could have been the gearing that won it for Fred Schaefer.
I think it just came down to old brute horsepower, Gary.
Well, Gary Porter walks away. He realizes he has got to figure it out.
Now, we're on board with him right now. He gives a thumbs up to the starter, waiting for the light to go green. Man, let's hope for a straight run.
Carolina Crusher, the far lane, and Gary Porter takes the victory.
Well, here we go again.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. We've talked about this in shows past. I mean, I think they have to take that truck back to Texas, take it all the way down to the bare frame, and almost start from scratch, because it's certainly not the driver. We have seen this Scott in victory lane before, but not this season.
And the hydro barriers.
Well, once again, Gary Porter takes the victory, but really the spotlight was on Scott Stevens, because he's the guy that got in trouble.
Yeah, Porter was just out walking the dog. Meanwhile, Stevens gone fishing.
Well, Scott's using some very expensive fishing tackle, if that's the case, Army. He's getting lots of airtime. Every time he crashes, we talk to him. What's the strategy for Gary? And here's Army Armstrong.
One of the things that fascinates a lot of people about these behemoth monster trucks is the size of the tires. And what we're going to do is talk about tire technology, believe it or not, in monster truck racing. On my left, you're right, I want you to notice the bar on this tire. This is the way they normally come out there on off-road equipment. It's a flat bar about 3 inches wide, okay? Keep that in mind, flat bar 3 inches wide. Let's go over to the new tire concept that Gary Porter's running. He's taking that flat bar and sharpened it. It's almost razor sharp in order to get a good bite and a good claw into the clay surface. So like anything else, tire technology in monster truck racing is very, very important.
Army, that reminds me of the tires that we have in the mud bog competition.
Yeah, see, the angle that they're cutting these tires will pull the vehicle straight. Right now, he better pull hard. No.
Oh, no, the youngster from Granite City, Illinois, and the Chevy Taurus truck takes the victory. He doesn't look too excited there in the cockpit, does he?
No, I tell you what, this family gets so excited when they race. We've talked about it before. I don't think I've ever seen them walk in the pit area. They run everywhere, and they're going to be running in the next round.
We have seen senior Jack Willman Sr. win in the Taurus truck.
What,
now
Gary, when it's going your way, it's going your way. See what I mean?
Safe at home. Andy Brass almost a little grass stain on the driving suit there. Here's Fred Schaefer in barefoot, and he will go up against the fastest loser from round 2, and that is Gary Porter in the Carolina Crusher.
Well, once again, Gary, it comes down to a horsepower game. The chassis are about the same. The horsepower advantage should go to barefoot. Remember, Schaefer has never won in this particular type of competition against these trucks. He has been to the final. Wow, look at that. You see it?
You see him carry the front end?
Literally powered, horsepower, raw horsepower, and they get together on the end of the track.
That was just a love tap right there. That was kind of a congratulations.
That's called
nice
driving
ride.
it out the back door big time. Look at this.
Watch him pull the wheelie right here as it gets on the throttle. Look at this.
It's like two pit bulls going after each other. Neither one's going to give.
So barefoot will go against Bigfoot for the championship here in Wisconsin.
Battle of the Blues, brother.
It's Chevy against Ford. And there's a good look at Fred Schaefer. Oh, what horsepower he had. There's just a little nudge right there. No damage. No harm, no foul. We're ready for championship cap.
Well, I'm glad to hear that he stays home and watches us on TV when he's not racing.
Well, here is the Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter, and no one knows. They call him Colt Cobra in the snake bite.
460 cubic inch blower drive service engine in the snake bite. That's about all we know about this truck. On the far lane, Gary Porter, one of the nicest guys in the sport, but Porter left second in this race. Can he pull it back mid-range? Yes! Look at here, Gary.
Look at the horsepower. You can see the flash bulbs going off in the background. That was sheer horsepower because the reaction time went to snake bite.
Well, that was like an interior lineman. He got down and got after it at mid-track. Watch this. Snake bite definitely out there. Now Porter
lifts the front end, and he takes the victory, and Gary now is with Army Armstrong.
Gary, isn't it wonderful that there's a second half to a racetrack?
It sure is, because my alarm clock wasn't working that run, and I was sleeping bad at the line. And, you know, luckily, you know, I had enough power and, you know, big enough motor and everything to get me, you know, going between the two sets of cars. Other than that, snake bite would have beat me.
I'll tell you what, he laid a shot on you on the line. You're around, though. We'll watch you in that next round.
Okay, thank you.
That wraps up round 1 competition. We're coming back for the quarterfinals from Indianapolis, Indiana. He has the joy written all over his face as we take a look at Gary Porter in the Carolina Crusher, the Big A Auto Parts Carolina Crusher, and he will face off against Micro Machine, and that is Bob Breen, the Breen Brothers Racing Machine.
You know, the track crew wants to thank you for letting the starter use your rubber gloves in order to line these guys up today.
Those are not my Simpson fire retardant gloves.
Boy,
Now, this
Porter,
is going to be Gary Porter.
He's for real. And right here, Gary, you're looking at the future of the sport. Here are two high-tech trucks. They make a good run. The ideal scenario is to get your suspension literally to land like a wet sponge to absorb the energy, isn't it?
Well, of course, the suspension system allows the truck to land and the driver get back on the throttle, get that power back to the ground. It was all Gary Porter, and he's standing by with Army Armstrong.
Gary, you can almost tell how you're going to leave the line that time. You were not going to be left at the gate this round.
No, you know, I got a new motor in it. I've changed the suspension some. The truck's, you know, working and handling totally different. You know, I hadn't got used to it yet. You know, I am winning the races, but I still need to be running a half a second faster than what I am if I'm going to win here today.
What are you basing that on?
Well, you know, my reaction time's a little bit slow today. My suspension, I'm getting a little bounce, you know, between the two sets of cars. And the motor, I'm not really turning the blower up like I was at one time, and I still have, you know, some minor motor adjustments to make.
We'll see you in the next round.
Okay, thank you.
As Gary Porter says, so many factors involved as we take a look at the semifinal matchup against Taurus. Taurus with Eldon Depew out of Granite City was the fast loser in our last round.
Both of these drivers have one thing in common. They've both been beat on the lights today. Neither one wants it to happen twice. Here we go.
Good start for both, but right now it's Gary Porter. He powers out. Eldon dips the front end going over that second set of cars, and Gary Porter in the Chevrolet, the Carolina Crusher, sponsored by Big A Auto Parts, takes the victory. So we will have a Ford and a Chevrolet in the championship shootout here at Indianapolis.
Look at that nose-over attitude of Taurus. Now, he says that's an easy truck to drive. I don't know, Gary. His idea of easy and mine could be two completely different things.
Well, there's a look at Gary Porter. He will be in the championship against Nick Rossi. We're coming back for one more pass.
I guarantee you, under that helmet, he's got the war paint on.
Gary Porter in the Big A Auto Parts Carolina Crusher. That's the Chevrolet. As they stage the two monster trucks for the final shootout here in the infield of the famed Indiana State Fairgrounds Mile Dirt Oval.
Well, this place has seen a lot of great racing, and we're at final time for the monster truck section now, Gary.
Both trucks are staged. They watch the Christmas tree. Indication both drivers are ready.
Hey, they both lead good. First jump, Rossi's out a little bit. Porter's got
once again, it's the horsepower of the Carolina Crusher.
Boy, Nick Rossi was a player till half track.
He had the reaction time, but Gary Porter had the horsepower.
That was a good race. These people in this part of the country, they're used to seeing good racing. Well, the monsters didn't let him down. What it was, Rossi didn't get as high in the air, see, and that let him get the horsepower back to the ground quick for the first half of the race, Gary.
But after that, it was all Gary Porter. He takes the victory, and he's down there with Army Armstrong.
Gary, these victories, they don't get any easier the further we go into this thing, do they?
They don't. I mean, the competition out here gets tougher and tougher, and you have to keep on improving, putting new parts. And, you know, I like to thank Big A Auto Parts, my brother's four-wheel drive shop, and all the friends back home for helping me, because if it wasn't for them, I couldn't do it.
You're basically a privateer in the sport, but still have a lot of people have to be helping you, don't they?
That's right. You know, most of the time out here at the races, I'll come by myself for the weekend, but back home, you know, I got some of the greatest guys there are in the world back home helping me. You know, my brother, you know, he helps me, you know, a lot of time after hours in the store, and if it wasn't for them, there's no way I could do it.
We're very proud of you. Congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
That's right, Army. Congratulations to Gary Porter. He'll go up against the Big A Auto Parts Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter.
Gary Porter runs a unique setup in the transmission. It's basically a stock GMC type transmission. It's been modified, but they run what they call a trans brake. It's been very successful in drag racing. The only difference in this sport and drag racing, these rascals weigh around 12,000 pounds. The drag cars that run them, they come across the scales at about 2,000 pounds. Wow, does it work, Gary? Look at that.
Well, Gary Porter gets the whole shot, applies the horsepower, and takes the victory. Gary Porter has always excelled on the outdoor long tracks. Gary Porter, by his own admission, will have trouble competing indoors, but he likes these high horsepower tracks.
And I don't blame you. It's just kind of his thing. You got short track specialists, long track specialists, and other forms of racing. He just doesn't like running in another man's wall. And I don't blame him a bit.
3 or 4 replays to determine that Andy Brass won it. Jim Booker coming up next in Wild Thing. And there's a look at the Carolina Crusher, sponsored by Big A Auto Parts. Gary Porter in the cockpit.
Well, the driver of the Wild Thing, like we told you earlier, this is his first year. He passed Scott Stevens in the first round. He got past a toughie there, but he got another toughie to go after now. And you know Gary Porter going to thump him if he gets a chance. Right there, he did. Big time.
Well, it was no contest. I think there was a mechanical problem there with Wild Thing. Gary Porter, though, keeps the foot in it, completes the run, and he will advance to the semifinals in the Carolina Crusher. And Booker is taking a sightseeing tour off the racetrack right now.
Back home again in Indiana. Booker got to see a lot of real estate right there, didn't he?
And
Look
he
at
was
Porter
going
on the
slow
right
enough
now.
to enjoy it.
See, Gary, you brought out an interesting point. He is constantly tweaking this truck. Even though he had what would consider an easy run, he still drove it hard to learn something.
Drive the racetrack. You're competing against the track and not the other drivers. And that's exactly what Gary Porter was doing. He was going after. I got paid. Few is still in competition. He'll be matched up with Steve Hess in Nightmares. They work on that pickup. And there is Bigfoot. Andy Brass out of St. Louis, Missouri, the Bigfoot 8 two-frame monster truck, and he goes up against a guy who loves the outside racetracks, Gary Porter, in the Big A Auto Parts Carolina Crusher. Ford against Chevrolet.
Boy, it's your classic battle, but right now it is a toss-up. They've both been here before. Brass leaves on Porter. Look at the truck settle at mid-range. The chassis, if there's such thing as a perfect chassis setting right now, it's with that truck. Whoa, the steering went away on it. Brass very wisely tags the brake to pull it around. But remember, in the first round, he lost the steering. I believe it happened to him again. He's driving right now with no steering, Gary Lee, none whatsoever. Kids can figure out how absorbing that energy works. You talked about my jacket. Look at your gloves on the lineup.
Oh, no, I like that jacket. You got to get me a jacket like that. There's Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher, and he could well be a guy to beat here this afternoon out of Wadesboro, North Carolina. Gary Porter in a Chevrolet. He goes up against Mike Vaughters in the Black Stallion Ford.
And Porter is notorious for his starting line. Vaughters comes onto the tour. It's about the 5th race we've had a chance to see this kid. He's trying to come up and go head-to-head with the big guys. Let's see if he can do it. Chevrolet on the right, Ford on the left. Porter in a far lane, notorious for strong starting line leads. Hey, this kid in the Ford gets off with him, Gary.
Oh, it's head-to-head right now, but look at that. Over the second jump, it was the Carolina Crusher.
Andy Brass, in the interview a moment ago, said you could put the horsepower to the track between the jumps. It's exactly what Gary Porter did.
Taking a look again, they come off the line, fender against fender. But about right here, the Carolina Crusher nails the hammer. Gary Porter has the advantage before he gets over that second set of cars. Gary Porter in the Carolina Crusher, and he goes up against the Auto Value King Crunch of Scott Stevens.
These guys have gone head-to-head many, many times, Gary. It's a heads-up race. GMC on the left, Chevrolet on the right. They know the game plan. When that goes green, we're racing. Porter, dark line. Stevens got to pull him back on the other end.
Oh, Porter gets him by a fender. Porter has always said he likes the long outdoor tracks, and that truck has always had the horsepower. It's always had the muscle. It might get beaten off the start, but he has the muscle down through no man's land.
Yep. On monster truck racing, you've got the first jump. Then this area right here is where they can plant the horsepower and fly. That's what Porter did.
Porter wins it by a fender, and look at this. They almost get together in the shutdown area. They certainly respect each other's driving, and Porter has made his way over to Army Armstrong.
Gary, when you and Scott line up, it's just a no-holds-barred deal, isn't it?
That's right. I knew Scott was running hard, and, you know, I knew I was going to have to push my truck really hard to take the win, and I think that was the fastest time of the weekend right there so far.
As Porter goes back to mix, now we will determine who he goes up against. Will it be Bigfoot 8, Andy Brass out of St. Louis, Missouri, or Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher, Chevrolet against Ford?
The trick is not to get a lot of air on the first set of cars. That's what the Few's doing. He's actually driving over the first cars. Then he can use that horsepower with all 4 wheels on the ground between the jumps. So these guys have watched the rookie, the Few's. They figured his groove, if you will. Let's see what they do.
So you're talking about self-discipline. As that light turns green, you nail the hammer, but don't nail it too hard.
There they go, both of them. Oh, that was a good
fender victory for Gary Porter's Carolina Crusher.
Wow, it's going to be an all Chevrolet final in Naples, Florida, and these people are pumped, Gary. Look at this.
Well, I think any time that someone like Andy Brass, that has won so many times, is defeated, the fans enjoy somebody else in victory lane. Today it will be somebody else, because right there the victory goes to Gary Porter, and here's Gary.
Gary, we're at the final time of the event. We got a couple of different scenarios here. Number one, experienced driver Gary Porter going against a rookie. Also, Porter is a leaver, and the kid on the rookie stripes is a top-end charger. Gary, who's going to win this thing?
Well, hopefully I will. You know, it's going to be a very good race. Taurus, he's running really strong. Elton is doing a superb job driving the truck. You know, it's going to be a real close race. I'm just going to have to watch the light real close and hope I can come off the line hard.
You got to push that light in order to get ahead of this kid, because you know he's going to be closing on you like a fast-moving freight on that finish line end.
That's right. You know, he knows I'll be right there, and I know he'll be right there. So both of us will be playing the light as close as we can and trying to get a good start.
Championship shootout.
Gary Lee, we got a unique situation here. We got the old veteran here. Gary Porter, been through these wars many, many times. His advantage is going to be on the starting line end of the track. The other side of the coin is this new kid. He may be a new kid in age, but I tell you what, he's driving like an old pro. He's going to have a top-end charge. He's going to be like Katie bar the door. So he's going to win this one. I really think if there was ever such a thing as a toss-up, this is it. The only common denominator, both Chevrolets in the final. Let's go.
Ford fans are somewhat disappointed that perhaps Bigfoot is not in the final, but it will be Chevrolet against Chevrolet. Gary Porter, the Carolina Crusher, Eldon Depew, and Taurus.
But there's another common denominator here, Gary. We opened the show talking about the technology in the sport. You hear Andy Brass talking about changes during the race and everything. The new trucks, the new style, two of the newest, are in the final.
All right, it's the youngster in Taurus, the veteran in Crusher.
Oh, heads up start, both drivers. Now they're in no man's land. Horsepower pays off.
Well, it's the Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter, but I think Gary had the advantage. I think he cut a better light.
He did. Boy, he drilled that tree, and it paid off on the other end.
Watch again. Watch the left-hand lane. Yeah, he cut a real nice light.
Down. See, he settled down in no man's land, and the Depew was bouncing a little bit. That's all Porter needed.
The chassis was working along with the horsepower. Gary Porter wins it. He takes the championship, and he's with Army.
Gary, the starting line advantage worked to your favor, but when the truck settled down in no man's land, it went like a rocket.
That's right. I was getting a good start. You know, I was watching the light really close, getting a good start. As soon as the truck would land over the first set of cars, I would shift the second gear, and then I would just pop third gear and just hang on.
Just settle down and made horsepower. Congratulations to you, Gary.
Okay, thank you.
And that wraps it up from Florida Sports Park here in Naples, Florida. For Army Armstrong, I'm Gary Lee. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to be with us next week for another edition of Trucks and Tractor Power. And now, here's news of an exciting home video release from Diamond B Sports. What famous actor?
I got it. Burt Reynolds.
Yes, Burt Reynolds. And there's the Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter. Here is a guy that's really come into his own the past couple of seasons.
He has. He's brought a lot of people into the sport. He's an asset to the sport, but right now, he's just one half of this race. And the kid out of Jupiter, Florida, his sponsors here, he wants to do good for him. Tropical Thunder, Carolina Crusher. You know the Florida people got to be pulling for the guy on the far side. He leaves with him.
But that's about all he can do. Look at the horsepower as Gary is able to clear that last line of cars.
During the first interview, Andy Brass told us the trick to this track. It's the right lane and clearing the final set of cars where you don't kick the rear suspension up. That's exactly what Gary Porter did. Porter is going to be a player. Watch the replay's going to come up, and you can see him. It's like an airplane. He flies over. You know, nothing can hurt you when you're in the air like that.
But with the technology, though, of these trucks, for the guys to be competitive, they have to have the new style suspension, which allows the truck to settle down with it. All right, here is Colt Cobra in snake bite. He is in the far lane. And now staging. It is the Carolina Crusher, Gary Porter.
I tell you, the drivers, they're excited about being in front of this crowd. These people are so receptive. First time these trucks have been in this part of the country, and they are just putting on one well of a show. Look at this.
It sounded like Gary nailed the throttle, came back out of it, then back in the throttle.
Yeah, burped the throttle and went right back for him.
I love the terminology in racing, burp the throttle. We should do an entire glossary of motorsports.
You sprint car guys got your own language. We got ours, but we're all having fun, and that's what it's all about.
Well, the folks here in Naples are certainly having fun as we get ready for semifinal action. We'll take a look at the pairings, but Well, right now the
has the
Sippy
best
hole
mustache in all of motorsports. And here's the GMC Auto Value King Crunch of Scott Stevens. And there's the Chevrolet, the Carolina Crusher of Gary Porter. The winner here goes on to face Foot for the championship.
We know the final is going to be Ford versus GMC, or General Motors against Ford Motor Corporation.
And it's going to be the Chevy of Gary Porter.
Now, he cleared that final set of cars. First interview of the day, Andy Brass said, you've got to clear the final set of cars. The big question here, who's going to have lane choice to get in that right lane? That could determine the winner.
So it will be Ford against Chevrolet. Give the fans something to cheer about here in Naples. Look once again. Now, Scott Stevens got the whole shot. Again, it's the horsepower right here, and he clears that last set of cars. If there is a most improved driver, it's Gary Porter. Here he is with Army.
Gary, you've been here many times before. You know the drill. What are you going to do?
Oh, the pressure's there. Bigfoot, he's running awfully strong today. I'm just going to try to get him on the light and get a good takeoff. And hopefully the truck, after the first set of cars, hopefully will land straight, and I'll just stay in it hard as I can.
Who gets lane choice in this race?
I have lane choice this time. I'll be in the right lane. That's where I've been running all day. And it's still going to put Bigfoot in the lane he's been running all day, so it should be a really close race.
And Army, you know that these guys will bring out the best in each other. It's Chevy
Gary,
against...
exactly what I'm talking about. Gary Porter goes out and starts to roll the starting line. Brass is doing it in the other lane. There's a little indentation. They're trying to pack their starting line in. They just got to make it hold for one time. Like we were saying earlier, all they need is just a little more power now.
What more could you ask for? It's Ford against Chevrolet. Bigfoot, Andy Brass, the Carolina Crusher, and Gary Porter. Andy Brass has been the guy to beat for the past several seasons, but Gary Porter has really come on as of late. If there were a most improved driver award, I think it would go to Gary Porter.
It would have to. I agree.
Yeah, he's
and
putting
the other
his act
drivers will
together.
tell you that.
All right, here it is. Looking at him. Right lane. Now the far lane is Andy Brass, the near lane. Well, a problem. It was a hole shot, but there's a problem with Andy Brass. It was all Gary Porter. The fans showed their delight. Chevrolet takes the victory here, and look at Andy Brass. Well, he's going to cross the finish line at about 10 or 15 miles an hour.
Yeah,
the fans seem to enjoy the victory by the Chevrolet.
The important thing is he is going to cross the finish line, and you know, he got beat, but he's not going to roll over right here. He'll finish the race for the fans. Chevrolet, they take this one today, but the circuit goes on.
Well, Gary Porter is your winner here, and he walks down to talk to our Army Armstrong. Congratulations, Gary.
Hey, Gary, they're still sweet, aren't they?
They are. Why can't we race here every day? You know, the track down here has been great. The facilities, the people down here, everything has been really great down here at the Motorsport Park. I like to thank General Tire, you know, Big A Auto Parts, and everybody to help, you know, helped me and helped put this event on.
Our congratulations to Gary Porter. That will wrap it up from Naples. Thanks for joining us for Army Armstrong. I'm Gary Lee. Join us next week for another edition of Trucks and Tractor Power. Now, here's news of an exciting video release from Diamond P Sports. And in round one, he draws up alongside Gary Porter, the veteran from Wadesboro, North Carolina, in the Carolina Crusher.
Gary, a lot of people wonder about qualifying, how important it is. I want you to watch Gary Porter's qualifying shot that took place earlier in the evening. Think he's not serious about this sport?
Well, he looks totally out of control here, and somehow he uses all the runoff area, all the shutdown area, uses both lanes. It only hits the tire.
Now, this is what's unique. Same scenario. He's in the same lane, but now there's a guy sitting in the other lane. This has to affect Smozanik's psyche about the run. He's got to know that Porter could possibly get over to him.
And he's out of shape again. And he's almost upside down, off to the left, off to the right.
Boy, big-time driving right there. Gary Porter literally pushing it to the limits. You said earlier the shutdown was going to be a problem. The drivers have just proven it right there as Porter literally high-sided. We got the replay coming up. Good run. He dominates the race, as you can well see. But the problem comes at the very end. The truck goes to the left now. He hooks a rut, high-sides it, back on the throttle, and brings it back around. And, Gary, we had an onboard camera. If you ever wondered what it felt like to take that ride, let's take it right now. The starting line looks good. The first jump. Now he starts working to the left. And hook a rut right here, Gary. Up on the side, onto the throttle, spins it back to the left. Well, we got a couple of Garys to the end of the track. What's he have to say about it?
Well, Gary Porter was the fast qualifier, but you look like a driver with a Joey Chitwood thrill show out there with driver's side down, driver's side up. How'd you bring him back under control?
Well, I just tried to drive the truck the best I could, and throttle it when it needed it. And I was, it was, just luck, I guess. The truck in qualifying and went over to the left a little bit, and then the first round it went over really bad. And I thought the truck was going over, but I said I'm not, going to quit right now. I'm going to try to bring it back up, and
There's the hired gunner in the sport. I love this guy. You put the money out there, he'll come race for it. The ideal scenario for Fred is to get the front end up. Now, Gary Porter has the same psyche. They both want to go wheels up on the starting line and actually hit the first jump with the rear tires. Let's see if either one of them is going to be able to figure it out. This will be a good start. It'll be a quick run. See, both of them wheels up. Porter's out on
Gary
it.
Porter takes it.
Wow.
Gary Porter takes the victory in the Carolina Crusher over the, as you call him, the hired gun, Fred Schaefer. And that, speaking of a hired gun, was a great shootout.
These guys are like two bullies in high schools just trading licks back and forth. Want to get one day, want to get one the other day. But see the wheels up start? Gary Porter did exactly what he wanted to do. He did not hit the first obstacle with the front tires. He hit it with the rear tires.
Fred had to back out of the throttle because he was out of shape coming off that opening jump, and that's where Gary Porter took the advantage. Now watch. He veers off to the right. He's out of shape right here. He backs out of the throttle to maintain control.
Yeah, and then he tried to burp the throttle, pull it back on, but too late. Porter was already on the other end. Hey, but that's what monster truck racing is all about, and that's why people love it so much. This Final Four, this could be known as the round of reckless abandonment. Every one of these guys are going to do something goofy before it's over. I've just got
controlled mayhem.
Yeah, exactly. We're all in a big building with 1,500 horsepower and 20,000-pound trucks jumping things. Hey, something weird has got to happen.
Send your letters to Army Armstrong. We're going to have something goofy here in the Hoosier Dome.
What did I say? Watch it.
Look at him pull the trigger on the Auto Value King Crush, but where did Carolina Crusher come from?
What I
Where
say,
did he
normally
come
Gary
from?
Porter's the leader. Stevens knew that. You get out of the Final Four in this kind of competition, you just never know.
Stevens had him. Stevens had him. He pulls a great light. Look at this.
Yeah. Whole shot to Stevens. Porter, though, settles down right now. Burps the throttle,
And he
plants
wins
the
it right
horsepower,
there.
and flies past him. What can you say? Half of the last show is set. We know Porter's going to be back. Who's he going to be going against? That's the big question right now. But Porter is still having trouble in the shutdown area. We opened the show showing you problems with this truck. He hasn't solved them yet. He's getting closer, Gary. I don't think he's solved them yet. Again, goes around on the onboard camera, tells you he keeps hooking. Gary?
Well, Gary Porter, you go to the championship, but I got to tell you, King Crunch was all over you at the start.
Yeah, I think he might have red light. Since I went ahead and won the race, I didn't, protest or anything, but I think he might have jumped the light. And I knew I was going to have to, get him there between the two sets of cars after he left first.
Long and Chevy against Chevy.
Gary, I made an observation a moment ago. We had a camera shot showing the intensity of Gary Porter. In Vietnam, we call that a 1,000-meter stare. That's the type of intensity this final is set up. Porter's not the only driver in a monster truck with the same stare. This building is not 1,000 meters long. Here we go. Final time. Chevrolet's a pair. North Carolina going against Illinois. Horsepower track at its best. Both of these guys are ready to do their thing, Gary.
Right there off the start, it's the Carolina Crusher. Fred Schaefer gets in trouble in barefoot, but it was all Gary Porter. How'd you like that explosion there? That caught me by surprise.
Me too. I was ducking. I didn't know what was going on.
You thought you were back in Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we got a good monster truck final. Just a little bit of a hesitation by the barefoot truck. Cost him on the starting line. Porter goes out and legs the horsepower in that Chevrolet engine. And hey, Porter's nice. Money goes back to North Carolina from the Indiana.
And you can see each pass, Gary Porter had it dialed in. He had trouble early on in qualifying. He had trouble with his first round pass, but after that, he got that chassis dialed in.
People don't realize that these monster truck drivers are like any other kind of racers. They're constantly working on their trucks between rounds. You don't just put the big tires on and go racing. This is a sport of technology. They're always trying to tweak them, as you guys call it. Well, our Gary Lee's down with tonight's winner.
Gary Porter has driven into victory lane at Indianapolis. Congratulations.
I think the competition here has really been tough. I'd like to thank Big A Auto Parts for standing behind me, for the few years they have. My brother and all my friends back at the shop, CarQuest, and Special Events for putting on this race.
Gary, congratulations once again. That will wrap it up from the Hoosier Dome. Join us next week for another edition of Trucks and Tractor Power. Now, here's news and an exciting video release from Diamond P Sports.